Hello, my name is Emily Weiss. Thank you all for attending my Big Word presentation. This year, I focused on the topic of divorce and how it impacts children for my senior research paper. I wanted to begin by saying that this presentation is not meant to insult anyone or make anyone feel doomed or sad about their future. All my research is just statistics, and there are many people who defy those statistics that I am mentioning. With that being said, I would like to begin by showing you all a short video clip that summarizes my research. But before I do, if you don't mind answering the question on the piece of paper in front of you so that we can compare the people in this room to the statistic of America when relating it to the percentage of divorce. After you answer it, if you guys could all pass it to your left so I can collect it and record it, that would be great. Thank you. I'll give you a minute to write it all down, and then we'll start the video clip. Okay, thank you.
Dear Mom and Dad, I know that you are hurting. I'm hurting too. I feel and feed off your tension, fear, and shock. Although I am young and cannot express verbally what is happening in our lives, I am still feeling the impact. My heart is broken every time I have to give up a parent. My sense of security is lost. Please don't assume that I am resilient. Please don't assume that my life will be exactly as it was, and that I will continue to feel the same. I am a human being just like you. Yours. I need love, attention, nurturing, stability, consistency, affection, understanding, patience, and mostly to be wanted. When you fight over me or put me in the middle of your argument, you are sending me the message that winning with each other is more important than my life. I am learning from you that it is better to be right than to be loved. You are teaching me that I came from a person who is unlovable and wrong, and that I am somehow wrong too. When you confide your hurt in my heart, you are storing up adult pain and robbing me of my childhood. You are taking away my belief that love is unconditional and replacing it with a message that tells me to become hard and not to love because I will get hurt and not be able to recover. You may not understand this today, and I am so small that you are not thinking about my future, but you are putting me at a greater risk of getting a divorce myself. At times, you are risking my safety to fill a void in your heart. My safety is your job. Without you and your protection, I am unshielded from the world. This will manifest in irrational fears for me, because I will stay in a state of fight or flight for most of my life. Someday, this initial shock will wear off, but how you choose to parent me through this crisis will never wear off. I will either feel your sense of selflessness, support, protection, or I'll have a scar on my heart with a message that reads, "Good things happen to good people. It must be bad." Thoughtfully, the child of divorce.
So my main argument that I'm going to be touching on throughout this whole presentation is that although a good number of people in society are deluded in thinking that divorce only increases short-term effects on children, the impact that it leaves is much more long-term, and we'll discuss those various reasons throughout the whole presentation. I just kind of want to take you through what I'm going to be talking about throughout my presentation. I'm going to start with what changes a child's reaction to divorce. Then we're going to go through the immediate effects of divorce, the relationships and how divorce impacts them, how it changes their future, speaking to children, the opposing argument of all my research, and then my service learning project. But before I move forward, I just kind of wanted to let you guys know the results of the classroom and how they are compared to America. And right now I would be telling the class, but since it's an empty classroom, I don't know the results compared to America, which is roughly about 50% of American marriages end in divorce, and we are not sure right now what the statistic is, but I'm assuming it would only take about that long. So moving forward, to start, we're focusing on child reactions, and there are three main things that can actually change the way that a child reacts to divorce. And those three things are age, gender, and mental illnesses. With age, younger children often react to divorce differently from someone who's significantly older. Younger kids can't fully comprehend this situation, so they might react with more confusion or frustration just because they don't understand what's happening, why it's happening, or what that means for them. Older children can understand the circumstances, and they often have a period of reflection instead of a period of frustration. And this reflection just is kind of for them to prepare for their future and cope with the process, and it's a realization for them. Gender also impacts the way a child will react to divorce. Placing all stereotypes aside, boys tend to release how they are feeling by acting out and becoming aggressive, while girls tend to remain to themselves and usually keep their feelings inside, which often has to do with the statistic that girls have a higher percentage of mental disorders. And then along with that, going to mental illnesses, ones that have been already established can become more severe, and this can actually benefit the child, as awful as that sounds, because it might have been such a subtle mental illness that families don't realize it, but then with the divorce and the increased stress and the change, it can become more severe, and then families can take notice of it and get help for that child. And so that is one possible way that the child can benefit necessarily from it. But mental disorders will become more severe, and new mental illnesses can actually be established because of the new stress and the new life that is going to follow after divorce for children. So next we're going to kind of focus on the immediate effects of divorce, and just to begin, using this chart to the right, this shows the drastic decrease in annual income per family. Right here you can see that there's around a $20,000 decrease just solely after the divorce. And this can create a slew of financial, emotional, physical struggles for a family. And we're going to touch back on this later about the future and relationships and things of that nature. But not only the income, but also the oldest child often has to feel as if they often have to act as the lost parent during this transition process, and they're expected to take care of the younger child while also emotionally supporting the parent. This is way too large of an emotional and physical expectation, and whether the parent puts it on them or the child puts it on themselves, it's often leaves the child feeling inadequate just because it's such a high expectation that they'll never be able to live up to because they're still a child and psychologically they are not ready to act as a parent. Along with that, relationships in general tend to diminish, and we're going to touch about this in the next slide, but right now just in general, in an intact marriage, the child often sees both of their parents every day, and after a divorce, parenting time is kind of split. Either it's split in half or whatever the custody arrangement is, but they don't spend the same amount of time that they do in an intact marriage with their parents. And this can create a relationship that's not as strong as it would have been, or create a diminishing relationship. Along with that, coping, just like every child reacts differently to divorce, the coping process is also different, and it depends on age and gender mainly. With age, like younger children, like I said earlier, are usually more frustrated and more aggressive, so they might not necessarily, they might cope with the divorce by acting out, and that might be their mechanism of coping, where older children might have a period of reflection and kind of internally cope and go through their feelings. So those are just two different coping mechanisms, but an immediate effect is definitely being able to cope with the divorce, and their life isn't over yet, so they still have to move on with their life. So coping is a huge issue that a lot of children face. And then there are a few things, and there were two main ones during my research, that parents or adults can try to do to minimize these effects on children. And what I found is that those two main things are the communication and the level of conflict parents show to the kids. For communication, if a parent allows open communication between them and their child, or someone that the child, or allows the child to speak to someone that they're comfortable with, such as an adult, a teacher, a counselor, a psychologist, someone along those lines, the child will have a better understanding about the process as a whole, because even if they're older, they still cannot fully grasp it. And any feelings that they have about it will be discussed, and it can be just a better outlet for the child. Regarding the level of conflict, if parents expose their children to all the small fights that happen during court, or if they fight in front of their children, it'll only make the child feel worse. This can lead to the child blaming itself for the divorce because they don't fully understand what's going on, and all they see is more fighting, more bickering about simple little issues that the child feels that could have initially started because of them. Then there are effects that go way back deeper into the mind, and these are psychological effects, and these are very hard to minimize, if impossible. And these have to deal with becoming overweight or obese, and sicknesses. A child of divorce has a 57% chance, is 57% more likely to become overweight or obese than any other child. That is a huge increase in the possibility. This could be because of stress, it could be because of financial situations, it could be because of whatever, but 57% is such a big statistic that it just shows that children go through the divorce as well. And it's not just the parents who are feeling things. Along with that, sicknesses. Becoming sick as a child is a common thing, but children of divorce are more likely to become sick, and when they do become sick, they are more likely to stay sicker longer, and that is just shown in children of divorce. And this could be because of the lowered immune system, because of stress, it could be because of many different issues, but those are just two things that I found psychologically that they can try and be minimized, but they cannot be fixed as a whole. Moving on to relationships. Just to first start with this graph on the right, it just shows the importance of fathers. And it says that 90% of homeless and runaway youth, 71% of high school dropouts, and 63% of youth suicides are all children who grew up without a father. And that shows the 90% statistic, 71, 63, that's all almost much greater than the majority. And that just shows how important fathers are in the childhood process, in the growing process, in the learning process, and all processes that occur as a child. And the loss of that father greatly impacts the child. And unfortunately, in too many cases that we see, during a divorce, the mother gets full custody and the father gets none, and that's how they like it, both of them. This can extremely change a relationship, not only with the father, but also with the mother. And not only that, but all parents, the relationships extremely change after a divorce. Children can become resentful, they can hate a certain parent, they can love a certain parent, everything changes, and relationships do not stay the same after divorce with their parent. Along with that, children of divorce will start having trust issues because they've seen the negative aspects of a loving relationship. So they often wonder if the trust that they give out, if the vulnerability that they put out is worth it, and they do not like the feeling of vulnerability because they can be easily shut down, and they've seen that. Lastly, friendships. Whether they've been previously established or like a new friendship, they're much less likely to, like I said, open up and become vulnerable and emotional with these new or previously established friends because they are so afraid of that feeling because they know what it's like to be shut down. They can see it in their parents who were both very vulnerable because they were married, and then they just all fall apart. So those are how the relationships change. The last thing I'm going to be kind of touching on the most is the future. And this is my main point to my research, was that many people feel that divorce happens, and it does. And it happens, and a lot of children are impacted, and they are. And it's a setback, but it's not a huge setback. And they think that 5 years later, 4 years later, 6 years later, whatever it is, might change with the child. They'll go back to normal, and everything will be fine, and they'll live their life. And it's almost like they forgot what life was like with married parents, and it doesn't even matter. And I'm just here because I personally thought that wasn't the case, and I heard it so often that it's okay because, oh, your parents got divorced 10 years ago, so you should be fine now. And so I just kind of wanted to show through my research that children of divorce are impacted greatly in the future, and it might not necessarily be taken into consideration when people think about divorce. The first thing is low economic status. As we saw in the graph before, that $20,000 decrease, or however much it is per family, can drastically diminish, can put a family and puts many families yearly into poverty. And this cycle of poverty is extremely hard to get out of. So this child remained in poverty for the rest of their life simply because their parents got divorced and their mother or their father or both of them couldn't afford the certain things to give them an education or to get them safety, to get them further out of this poverty cycle. The next thing is marriage. Unfortunately, children of divorce have a much higher chance of getting a divorce themselves. And this can often turn a lot of people off to marriage. The idea of divorce for many children of divorce is so not worth it at all that a lot of people don't feel that marriage is worth it for the divorce. And if they do find it worth it, they have much different feelings about getting married than someone of an intact family. They are much more cautious, which might not necessarily be a bad thing, but they can be negative, they can be indecisive, they might not choose, they might not know many issues that deal with divorce, or that deal with marriage, that children from intact families usually don't experience, or don't experience to that degree. And then also just kind of a few little things put together is the stress, the academics, and then the forgiving. It is shown that children of divorce have much higher stress levels, and whether that is because they can't adapt to change as well, or because they have so much family stress that school stress put on top is just too much stress, whatever it is, they have been proven to have higher stress levels than their classmates or than a person from an intact family. Along with that, academically, they are statistically shown to perform less academically well than some of their classmates. And once again, each family has different circumstances for this. Just as a generality, children of divorce don't achieve as high as some of their classmates do. So these can all be huge things that set them back. And then lastly, forgiving. And there was a study done at Stanford University where a psychologist interviewed, I want to say, I'll find out the right thing, but I think about 100 students whose parents were divorced. And now these are children of divorce who have defied the academic statistic, defied the stress statistic, probably still comes from a high economic status just because of the tuition of that university, pretty much still succeeded when they had so many setbacks in their life. And they said, the question was asked, do you forgive your parents for the divorce? And these divorces occurred at their childhood, and now they're college students. And it was 78% of students had said that they do not and will not see in the future forgiving their parents. So that just goes to prove that time is not what is needed for normality of divorce. Time will not make a child forget what they went through. Time might allow them to cope with it and move forward, but it won't make them forget. And that's the issue, is that they will deal with these things in their future when it comes to marriages, when it comes to big events like this big board event, marriages, or weddings, graduations, parties, holidays, events such as those. They're supposed to be fun, exciting, happy. They tend to be stressful, annoying, have such a bigger responsibility because the child feels that they would be so embarrassed if their parent could not get along and they have to put them together in a room together and see if they can behave. And that's what this video is going to touch about for a little bit. Okay.
Forge this fragile peace between them.
Fragile piece.
They always made a mess of everything. Like all holidays, graduation, funerals.
I remember the funeral incident, and I maintain that funerals need to be about the person who died.
Right. And you know, I got smart, and over the years, I've started coming up with ways to avoid situations like this. You know, like in Thanksgiving, who am I going to spend Thanksgiving with? Well, they think I'm in Honduras building schools with the U.S. CARES program, but little did they know the U.S. CARES program doesn't exist. So,
Oh, sounds real.
yeah, I mean, I got it figured out, but I don't know, this wedding, it's risky. I guess I'm just looking for some advice, someone to talk to super quick to figure out how to survive next year.
Okay, so as we can see in that video, he's stressed about all those things. I'm at 22. Okay, the opposing argument, the three main things is that there's normality with time, it can lead to better things, and it's better than the fighting. Normality with time, my whole argument is completely disagreeing with that because there is no normality with time, as I said before. It can lead to better things. I never found in my research any argument that actually supported that unless it was an abusive relationship, and most cases of divorce are not abusive relationships, so that doesn't really apply here. And then better than the fighting. Now this is a very common one that I hear often, and in my cases of divorce, I'm speaking specifically about children. And often they think, oh, well, the fighting will go away. But if you have a child together, you're often seen together at sporting events, graduations, holidays, anything like that. And so the fighting doesn't go away because you still have to interact with each other. You have to decide custody agreements, you have to decide sports, finances, and all those things. So nothing will go away because you're still together and actually fighting can be enhanced. Awesome. So now we're going to focus on my service learning project. For the service learning project, I went to the 48th District Circuit Court and worked with Judge Karen McDonald to provide a pamphlet for those who attended her court due to divorce-related issues. I spoke to both men and women, kind of gave them a pamphlet that provided them with psychologists, psychiatrists, helplines, websites that they can visit, and information from my project that will best benefit their child and how to go about talking to them and helping them through this process as well. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? I'm still at like 24.